Hello and welcome to another episode of the D.A.R.E podcast. I'm Miranda Brawn, your host and the creator, and I'm delighted to welcome a fabulous guest with us here today. She's a dear friend. I've known her for many years. We actually met at 10 Downing Street many years ago, and her name is Terri Duhon. I am going to hand the mic over to Terri, and then I'll be back.
Hi, Miranda. It's so exciting to be here on the D.A.R.E podcast. So my name's Terri Duhon, and I can't wait to hear the questions that you have for me today.
It's very exciting. And I mean, you've literally started as a banker. You were a trader. On Wall Street.
Yep.
One of the original, I think, in terms of credit derivatives and helping to launch that product.
Yes.
Then became
part of the dream team.
Yes. And then you were an entrepreneur. You launched a training business to help people understand the derivative products on the trading floor.
That's right.
Then you became an Oxford academic.
Correct. I became an associate fellow.
Yes. Right. And then a board director, charities, and now you're in the board of financial organizations. This whole episode, I think, should be on the reinvention, because I think one of the comments I put in your LinkedIn was, it's just ageless. Reinvention has no age. And I think certain people are restricted in terms of they think, oh, well, if I haven't done this by X date, I can't do it. And what would you say to someone thinking that?
To be fair, this is the thing I talk about a lot, which is the starting point for everything is, where would you love to be in 5 years' time? It doesn't matter where you are today. Forget about that. Don't let that stop you. Don't let that limit you. Don't let your past define you, because we're only really a function of our future potential. So if you ask yourself, where would you love to be in 5 years' time? Start with that dream and then work your way back. And then take that first step, whatever it is. It doesn't matter where you are today.
I love that. And I think that's the most important thing. Just take the next step.
Take the next step. Take the next step. I've taken big steps. So,
yes.
From the trailer to MIT to Wall Street to entrepreneur to the boardroom to Oxford University to now to the stage.
Yeah.
I've taken these big shifts. But the truth is actually that today the world is changing so fast that we all have to be thinking about, how are we going to change with it? Is it change that's going to disrupt us, or are we going to move forward and change and look at it as opportunity rather than something scary? I'm sitting on the trading floor. We think about risk a lot, but you never talk about risk on its own. So we talk about risk and return. So many people think about change as something risky and scary. And the truth is, the opposite side of that coin is return, right? What's the return? What's the opportunity? So if we think, okay, I'm going to take a little bit of risk, but it's coming at me no matter what. So why don't I look at it as opportunity and think, what's the next me? Take this opportunity to think, where would I love to be? And that's it. It's as simple as that.
And it is really as simple as that. I think some people make it more complex than it needs to be. Well, that's a really good way of describing that. So you've mentioned trailer to MIT, and you're very open about your childhood and where you grew up. So you grew up in, where was it? In
Louisiana.
That's it.
Louisiana.
Yes.
To be honest, I wasn't always very open about it. I think I was originally, I have massive imposter syndrome. Still today, I have to remind myself that I belong in this room. I remember, a few years ago walking into the boardroom and thinking, what's this little Cajun girl from a trailer in Louisiana? What is she doing in this room with all these amazing people? And then I had a moment and I had to remind myself, I'm a 52-year-old woman. I have a lot of I deserve to be here. I belong here. That was a few years ago. I'm now 54, to be clear. But I just remember thinking, well, of course I deserve to be here.
Of course.
And I have to remind myself that. But when I first started on the trading floor, I was in an analyst program at JP Morgan. And it felt like, and I'm sure this is not the case, but it felt like everybody had come from an Ivy League or Oxbridge or some famous university around the world. They all seemed it seemed like none of them really needed their paychecks. They all talked about doing things like going to the Hamptons for the summer or skiing in the winter, and I couldn't do any of those things. I barely had enough money to eat on the weekends. I was paying back loans from going to MIT, and I was deeply embarrassed of how poor I was and how poor my background was, because they all seemed so sophisticated. And I just pretended. That I wasn't poor, that I wasn't from that I wasn't from just real poverty. I just pretended. And eventually it just became very clear that actually not everybody really was as wealthy as they sounded. And some of it was my own issue. I still hate skiing, by the way. I don't ski. I board instead, because it feels like something for rich people, and I just hate it. Tennis, I refuse to pick up golf. I just won't do it. They just feel like exclusionary sports, and I hate them. Now, that's not to say my husband and my kids don't do them, but I refuse to participate, because they just feel like such elitist things that I'm clearly scarred. But I talk about it a lot today, because I think actually when I started talking about it, my background and how different I thought my background was, the truth is so many other people came forward and said, me too. I felt very different. And everybody's question when I meet people, the big question they want to ask is, what was it like being a woman on the trading floor? And the truth is, I didn't even notice, because at MIT, I was in the math department. Only 10% of the math department at the time was female. I was used to being surrounded by men. MIT was very male dominated when I was there. So going to the trading floor wasn't much different. The real distinction for me, the real difference, was a difference that you couldn't see. It was the fact that I felt like I didn't come from the same social structure, social fabric that everybody else did. And I felt like I had to hide that. So it was a difference that you couldn't believe the things people said, which made me feel excluded. Silly things like, what are you doing this summer? We're going to the Hamptons. We're renting a place on the beach. We're going skiing. It's a group of us are going skiing. And I remember the first time I decided to join one of these little excursions. I never made it to the Hamptons. But I did eventually go and visit, but I never made it. I never rented a place myself. It just always felt like I just didn't belong. But I decided to go on a JP Morgan ski trip. This is with, the credit derivative team. We were the dream team at the time. And we all decided to go to Park City, Utah. And I thought, well, you know what? This is a competitive group of people, right? I can't ski. I pretty much hadn't seen snow until I got to MIT, really, so at 18. So I thought, well, hang on. I'm not going to try to compete with this group, because I can't. I'm going to snowboard instead. And so I put myself in a snowboarding class, and I was determined to snowboard. I twisted my knee. I think I bruised my coccyx. I mean, literally, I made a mess of myself that weekend because I was determined to get on that board and go down with them on their skis. And it's laughable what I did, but I was just, and I still use it today as the example of, it reminds me that I should be proud of the difference that I have and the difference that we all bring to the table. And it's part of why, I talk about this in the boardroom as well. When you sit in a boardroom and people come from such different backgrounds and they have such different paths to get to that room, where all of a sudden they're sitting together and they're trying to come to an agreement or a decision or a direction, and they bring such different perspectives to the table because of these amazing different backgrounds that they have. So the trailer gives me a different perspective that other people don't see.
And I think that's a wonderful introduction into this. I mean, the fact that you grew up in a trailer in America, and now you're here in London, in the boardroom. I mean, that journey, of course you belong in these spaces. And, it's so refreshing that you are so open and honest about the fact that you are, a very successful businesswoman. and you still have imposter syndrome. Yeah. You know,
it's almost embarrassing, but it's I post about it a lot.
Yes,
because I'm just trying to be what I noticed. When I first kind of went down the road of putting myself out there and deciding to be a role model for others.
Yes.
10 years or I can't remember when we first met, but that was when I was really putting myself. 10
Downing Street, like
10 Downing Street, 10 years ago at 10 Downing Street. It was International Women's Day.
Tamara Box introduced us, and she's a former guest on here.
That's right. And the Prime Minister was Theresa May, and she came in the room and spoke to us.
Yes.
And, so I remember deciding that there weren't enough female role models. I needed to put myself out there and make it clear that it was possible. Anything was possible. And I started posting on LinkedIn and talking about it and talking a little bit about imposter syndrome because it had often been associated with women. And what I found actually was that the people that came back to me, they didn't like the post because they didn't want it to be public, but they messaged me privately and they said, it's not just about women. I feel this all the time. Thank you so much for talking about it. And I realized, hang on a minute, everybody has it. And it's something we all have to deal with because we all feel a little different. No matter, I think it helps me connect with more people. And it helps more people think, oh, hang on a minute, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I just have to walk into that room and remember I deserve to be there.
I love that. It's funny though, because I don't have imposter syndrome. I did have it though. And it's so funny because, I think it was just how I was raised. I was raised with so much confidence. No one's better than you. But it's really interesting with the conversation about imposter syndrome because we have so many successful people come on. And there is a very small percentage of people that are like me that say now, very successful, they don't have imposter syndrome. The high majority of people that do come on this podcast, they still experience it. So how are you managing that? Because you're still getting into spaces, you're in rooms, you're on boards of very successful organizations. So how do you manage that as advice to someone that's looking at this who might have imposter syndrome and might not want to take that next step? What advice would you give to them apart from, 5-year plan and just take that step? Is there any sort of success mindset tips or anything that you've done to really help give you that confidence to believe in yourself and take that next step?
So I think what I often say to people is actually, look, whether you have imposter syndrome or not, you need to be brave and walk into that room. And you need to be brave and raise your hand. You need to be brave and ask a question. You need to be brave and say just something simple, such as, I'd like a raise, or I'd like a promotion, or I'd like that opportunity, or these are my hopes and dreams. This is where I'd love to be in 5 years' time. How can you help me? It requires a bit of bravery to put yourself out there, and because it feels a bit risky, right? But the return, again, the return is so big because once you put yourself out there, once you walk into that room, then you belong in that room, right? Once you raise your hand and you ask that question, that's the right question to ask. Once you talk to your boss about your next steps, it's the right thing to do because now your boss is thinking, well, how can I help this person move forward? We have to...
If it's a good boss.
Well, you have to also...
There's some horror stories where they don't actually want you to achieve your goals,
You're right. That does happen. But I think on the whole, for every organization to have a bunch of very aspirational, ambitious people trying to all achieve at the same time, that's powerful, right? We want that in an organization. I would never say that an organization wants a whole bunch of people who are prepared to sit and do the same thing over and over and over for the rest of their life. That's an organization that's not growing, that's not evolving, because the world is changing. Every day we have to change with it, and we need people who are ambitious and want to work towards those goals too. And so with great management and leadership skills, you can take all of that ambition and that energy and that drive to move forward and move your organization forward with it. I believe that 100%. So I do think it's really powerful. But, at the same time, not everybody is on a traditional path. And that's part of the reason that I probably felt and still feel a little bit of imposter syndrome, because there are so many traditional paths that you see people on. And that looks like from the outside, it looks like they belong where they are, because they've done the right thing and they've done A and then B and then C. And for me, I took pretty non-traditional paths. I became an entrepreneur instead of working my way up the organization at JP Morgan. I built my own business and I built a brand and I became an academic. And that was my route. I wrote a book. That was my route.
We'll get to that in a minute, yes.
That was my route to the boardroom.
Yes.
Where the traditional route was you worked your way up, you became a managing director, you became a CEO of a large organization, and then you were invited to sit on another board. That wasn't my route. So when I got into the boardroom, despite having achieved all of these things, I looked around and thought, hang on, I haven't been on the right road. I've been on a pretty strange road. But what I realized eventually was that I got a seat at the table on my own terms. That felt pretty amazing. And I brought such a different perspective, because even my path to the boardroom was different. And so suddenly the questions I asked and the perspective I brought to the table was so valuable. And I didn't know that at first, of course, but other people came up to me and said, thank you so much for asking that question. That was brilliant. That's exactly what we wanted to hear. Nobody was saying it, but we needed to hear it. And I slowly gained more confidence. But of course now I'm still sitting in the boardroom. I'm still lecturing at universities, but I'm switching gears now, and I'm really focusing on being on the stage.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that is I actually believe I belong there in a way that I've not felt that about any other new thing I've done.
Yeah.
And I think that's because I grew up on stage. My mama was a dancer. She had a dance studio in our little village in Louisiana. And so I grew up.
Did you dance as a child?
I was a tap, jazz, gymnastics. I did a little bit of ballet, but I was much more, I was not as graceful as some of my friends were. I had huge energy for tap, jazz, gymnastics. I became a cheerleader in my local high school, as you can imagine, in rural Louisiana. I just full of energy and full of excitement. Of course, it was the days when music videos were just coming out, and MTV, if you had the money, we didn't, but I knew friends who had the money to have cable TV and watch MTV, and you could see these videos and people dancing, and they were just amazing. And I so wanted to be in a music video. I wanted to be on Broadway, in fact, but I can't sing.
There's still time.
No, I can't sing to save my life, but I could dance. So I could dance my way to, becoming a keynote speaker. That's my goal.
So I've known you for 10 years. I'm just discovering this about you. How amazing.
We all have such hidden fun stuff about ourselves, right? That's the good stuff.
I love that. And I think you're totally right. Just going back to the boardroom, because my journey to the boardroom was like yours, very unconventional. What do you think about women supporting women in the workplace versus when we first started in the 1990s?
Well, so today, what I will say is that the vast majority of women I know, senior women, are very, very keen to support other women. And they put a lot of energy into that initiative in various different ways, via mentoring, via coaching, via belonging to communities, also by putting themselves up as role models, which is an important story to tell. Most women I know are also prepared to talk about our fails, because nobody actually did it without failing. Nobody did it without having some horrific, embarrassing, epic fails along the way. And it makes the journey feel achievable. And that's really important. And most of the women I know do talk about that. And I think that's important. But their hand is out. And that is, always reaching down to help pull other women up and pay it forward, which I think is really critical. It is very different from when we first started. Certainly in the mid-90s, there were not enough women on the trading floor. There was very little value placed back in the day on management skills. In fact, I don't even think I knew the word leadership skills at the time. I think that's more common today than it was in the past. Coaching, mentoring, I don't even remember those terms on the trading floor in the 90s, but I do remember women reaching out to me on the trading floor and saying, I'm here for you. I'm so excited that you're here. How can I help? But they were very senior. And I wasn't even sure. They seemed larger than life. I wasn't even sure what to ask and where to go and how to even leverage those relationships at the time. But they were there. There was less structure around it and just far less of us. I mean, I literally could have counted on one hand the number of women I saw around me that were also trading or senior around me. It was an experience.
Yes. And you mentioned this within your book, how the trading floor really works. I was saying to you prior to this, and there's a section on women on the trading floor, really, ? And you're totally right that there wasn't that many women. When I started in the mid-1990s, once again, one hand, I think even half a hand in terms of women who were in a revenue-generating role.
Yeah. Well, even the terminology here is a little bit funky, right? The idea of splitting your workforce into revenue-generating and cost centers.
Yes.
I mean, how demoralizing is it to be considered a cost center? As opposed to a support function or a critical function that enables the revenue generation, because revenue generation isn't just about one person by any means.
You need that whole support system. You need the back office and the middle office.
That terminology was bad because, of course, it created a whole bunch of superstar behaviors, which are dangerous, right? And not always good for the whole.
When it comes to mentoring and coaching, it was not a thing. It was only until I was at the same bank. I returned back to the same bank where you had helped to form credit derivatives that I literally found 5 mentors. When I was working for a very large investment bank, the first black female MD had just joined. I remember emailing her and saying, hello, welcome to the bank. I would love to meet for a tea or coffee. And she responded, and we did. She became my first mentor outside of my mother. She was amazing. I remember saying to her, I really want to get onto the trading floor. And she was like, not on the trading floor. It's white men on the trading floor. You need to find yourself one white male person on the trading floor that can help you get there. Within the space of 6 months, I had 5 white male mentors. Within 6 months of finding that, I was on the trading floor in a revenue generating role, in a sales role. And I think that was such an important transition, but it took me 10 years. And I think someone might think, well, I've got a 5-year plan. Oh, I haven't reached my goals yet. And that's why I love to share the story that it took me 10 years to actually achieve my goal.
Well, I think the fact of the matter is, anything worth achieving
will take a while.
It's going to take some time.
And you can't give up.
And it's going to be a little tricky, right? And it's not a straight line. You're going to have some ups and downs along the way. And, the thing I keep reminding people is you cannot give up.
You can't.
Nothing worth achieving, right, happens easily.
Yeah.
And if you don't give up, my goodness, think about what you can achieve.
Exactly.
Even for me to get to Oxford University, it took, years of knocking on that door and saying, hey, I run a business that provides the training programs for all of the new hires on Wall Street and for all of the big banks. And what I've noticed is that we hire MBAs and they don't understand enough about the practicalities of what happens in the trading floor. So I would love to come and help your MBAs know it, be much more articulate and really understand it before they go into those interviews. Can I come and teach? That sounded so sensible to me. That sounded so, I mean, it just seemed like common sense. And the pushback was, well, you know, to become a lecturer at Oxford University, you need to have done a PhD and then a postdoc, and you need a bunch of publications in academic journals, and you need to be well known in the academic world. And I said, but I think you missed what I said. I have knowledge of how things really work, how the trading floor really works. And I want to come and teach that to your students. I've just published this book. I would love to come and help. I'm super excited and I love teaching. And it took a number of years. I mean, I knocked on that door so many times. Finally, though, they answered. And so living proof that you do not have to be an academic to become a lecturer or an associate fellow at Oxford University. Just like you don't have to be a genius to go to MIT, because, by the way, I sent them a video of me dancing in my application. I was pretty sure I could do the work, but I knew I needed to stand out. You don't need to have been the CEO of a major company to sit on a board. I had students come up to me so often, and these were, they were graduating from the Said Business School at Oxford University. They had MBAs. They had already worked. Some of them were amazing students.
Yeah,
and
they were.
They would come to me and say, look, I've sent in 80 applications and I've not gotten through. And I said, 80 more, send 80 more. I promise it is going to happen. What you bring to the table is amazing. Just don't forget that. And every one of them eventually found something pretty incredible, actually. Every single one of them. I just don't give up. And here's the thing as well, that, the thing you can't forget is that applications now, because you can do them online, because they're mostly online, you are not restricted to people that can travel into London or travel into New York City or travel into San Francisco. You're not restricted to people who have physical access to the location. It is now globally competitive. These organizations now are uber global organizations. They've got big profile, big brand names that everybody wants to be a part of. So what we're seeing is tens, hundreds of thousands of applications. And as a result, it is just a much more competitive space. However, it's a little weird because AI has changed the application process for many, and it is a much trickier one for the employer to navigate now. And I think that is certainly an interesting dynamic to take into account, and that we should all be thinking about very carefully. But for students who are applying, there are so many other ways there are programs you can go on. It's a much more complex journey than it used to be. The expectation for what you know already is pretty high. Mm. And so there's a lot of learning resources out there, including my book. There's also, you can't forget that it's not just the traditional banks anymore. It includes the fintechs, it includes the hedge funds, it includes the private equity, it includes boutique startups. The landscape has changed.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
I mean, you've got employers who are using AI to look through CVs. You've got candidates using AI to apply for roles. And I think, what do you think about people actually reverting back to it's who you know? Because it's if you've got the machine reviewing the machine, at some point it's going to be like, well, where's the human aspect in this?
Yeah,
if everyone's the same. I think it might go back to who you know.
I'm a huge fan of the human.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the human.
In terms of fintech and legacy bank debates, you sit on various financial organisation boards. What's your views on traditional banks? Are they completely doomed, or is the fintech just hyping and masking the same old risks? What are your views on that? Legacy banks versus fintechs?
It's actually a great question. So I actually lecture on a fintech course that Oxford has done for over 10 years. And I used to come in and talk about fintech versus the incumbents and what it looked like. And the truth is that 10 years ago, the incumbents looked like they were doomed. In fact, we talked about fintechs as this huge threat, massive disruption that they were going to create in the financial services space. We were all a bit scared. What could possibly happen? But they didn't disrupt as fast. They didn't grow as fast as we assumed. So in the meantime, the legacy banking world, the legacy financial services world made huge leaps in terms of their digital capabilities. And of course, everybody still has legacy systems. Frankly, today, even fintechs have legacy systems, right? Because AI has come. I mean, things are moving so fast. So if you started a business, a fintech 10, 15 years ago, that's got to evolve constantly. But the banks have caught up in a way. And if you think about it, your banking app is far more friendly than it used to be 10, 15 years ago. In fact, you probably didn't have an app. You had to call someone or you had to walk into a branch. It's just a different world today. I think many of the incumbents have caught up. I think there are probably some laggards who still have to make some moves. I think there's still a lot of, not disruption, but evolution to come from the fintech space. Although I would say that some incumbent banks have kind of picked up on some of those and are trying to, build that disruption themselves. I think what the fintechs have done has been right. They've absolutely put, in most cases, client first and said, hang on a minute, this doesn't work. This is too expensive. This is hard. This is clunky. This is not welcoming. This is not helping me. And when you put the client first, it changes the conversation, right? And I think that's been great. So I'm a big fan of the evolution that the fintechs have forced onto the financial services system. I think there'll be some winners. There could be some losers, but I think the evolution's been good for all of us. So that's probably the most diplomatic answer. It's not really going to go viral, but I think it is the truth.
So, when I said I was a visiting fellow at Oxford, I was researching the Brawn Review, which is on boardrooms, sustainability, inclusion and governance. It's 50 recommendations, over 1,000 global board members in terms of what does organisations in the boardrooms, and it's all boardrooms, need to be doing to make an organisation more inclusive, more sustainable with good governance. You can't talk about governance in 2026 without thinking about AI. What would you say organisations need to be doing in order to, and what conversations, without breaching confidentiality, but your viewpoint in terms of what organisations should be doing to become more sustainable, more inclusive, but also how to have good AI governance?
So AI governance is a conversation that, as risk chair in a number of places, we've been having for years now, because of course, AI is not totally new. And in fact, if you look at the trading floor, 10, 15 years ago, we were putting in place algos. And those algos are sort of the early versions, those algos, we talked about it, a lot of it as AI ML, so AI and machine learning. It wasn't really LLM, large language models yet, but we did talk about it as something that needed its own governance. And so we've been looking at governance around algos for a very long time. That's kind of the early stages of governance around all models and governance around AI. So when ChatGPT launched, it's in November 22, so almost 4 years ago now, a long time. When that launched, it really snapped, we all had to stand up and pay attention and think, how are we going to do this safely? Is it going to add value? Is it going to be more risk, or is it going to be more opportunity? Is it going to hit the bottom line? Is it going to hit the top line? What does it cost? And that conversation has evolved. It has been nonstop, and it is still evolving. And I am fascinated at how much it's changed even from the early days. So AI governance is absolutely critical conversation for every board. They should be having it. because undoubtedly what is true is that most employees are using it, whether it's approved or not. So you need to be thinking about, where is your data going? Who has access to your data? And as a result, are you breaching any rules and regulations around that data? Or is it data that is a competitive edge that you don't want to be out there? So that's just one small reason for all of us to be thinking about governance around AI.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. All the boardrooms I'm in, I always mention DE&I, but also AI.
Like the eyes.
I like the eyes. You can't have a conversation without. Did you secretly know that you were building a ticking time bomb, as some would call it?
No.
Or creating a bulletproof financial tool, which I think is where our mindset was.
Well, look, so I was featured in a Frontline interview, a deep dive on this. Frontline, I guess, is a bit like Panorama. I was also interviewed for Gillian Tett's Fool's Gold book on this topic, because
it focused on your early career.
These were big questions at the time. But I was on the trading floor from 94 to 04. And I came into the credit derivatives team very early and helped to build that marketplace. In particular, I was an exotic credit derivative trader. Nobody knew what credit derivatives were. Nobody knew what exotic credit derivatives were. And I was trading effectively correlation, something really, really exotic. I was the only one on the street. So actually I wasn't really trading. I was just kind of trying to figure out how to price something like this, what's the value of it? What's the risk? What's the, all of that. So it was fun times. But they were fun because we felt that we were building something. We felt that we were changing the landscape of the financial marketplace. Our belief was that at the time, the vast majority of credit risk sat on the balance sheets of 20, 30 major banks around the world. And we thought, with the use of credit derivatives, we could synthetically move that credit risk and disseminate it across to thousands of investors around the world, and thus reduce systemic risk in the system. What we hadn't really considered is that because they were so interesting, and the financial market space was far more entrepreneurial in the 90s everywhere, is that people took the idea and ran with it and did lots of different things with it, and ultimately created more leverage and in more concentrated places than we knew about in some cases. And it was completely contrary to the original idea, which was to take all this concentrated risk and disseminate it so that through the business cycle, there was less impact on the marketplace. And what would naturally happen in a business cycle, if you think about it? So a big bank gives out a lot of loans. During a downturn in the business cycle, less people can pay back those loans. So the bank starts to get worried about their credit risk, and they stop giving out as many loans. So it exacerbates the credit cycle. So what it does is that business cycle, instead of being relatively minor, actually becomes even bigger. So our idea was, if we can disseminate that risk, then the bank can more consistently lend money, and more consistently give out credit risk, give out credit through the business cycle rather than exacerbate the business cycle. That was one of our ideas.
So now we're going to go through some rapid fire questions, just a few. What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Oh, sadly, I check my phone.
Oh my gosh. The last thing you do before you go to bed at night?
I'll read something, or I'll watch something, a bit of TV or a bit of reading, something to make the mind just kind of slow down.
Yeah. And what's your favorite book?
Gosh, I have, I don't know. I love reading. I read all the time. I read so much.
A book that might have changed your life, something?
Oh, gosh. I loved The Hunger Games.
Oh, Oh, very good. Very
loved
good.
The Hunger Games.
Favorite film?
Oh, probably the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Oh, favorite song?
Gosh, when I was young, it was something by Madonna.
Oh, I love Madonna, yes. What's keeping you up at night?
You know, I don't think much keeps me up at night. I do worry. I am worried about the existential risk of AI, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'd love to. I've spent a lot of time in conferences and roundtables talking about it. It is properly concerning.
Well, it's definitely the topic at the moment. You can't go on LinkedIn without someone talking about AI. Flats, heels, or trainers?
Oh, God. Heels. Should I show you? Because honestly, I'm short, right?
We haven't got much time.
You know, I need my beautiful heels. Hello. I mean,
I can see the dancer in you with the leg flip. Right.
You know,
now,
I'm short. I need to stand up. I need to be tall in the boardroom.
Very good, very good. Always ask this as the final question. What do you dare our audience to do?
Dream. Dream big.
Which is what the D in D.A.R.E stands for. That's the perfect way of ending. So we've come to the end. We could talk for another hour, I know, but I want to thank you so much for coming on the D.A.R.E podcast and sharing your wisdom, your experience, your insight. I know it's going to inspire so many people who are listening and watching our YouTube. Do you have any final quick words before we close this off?
Oh, thank you. No, it was super fun. Thank you.
Good.
What fun
We've loved having you. So thank you for joining.
Well,
thank you so much for watching the D.A.R.E podcast. Feel inspired, definitely do click the like, subscribe, follow button. If you would like to sponsor an episode or recommend a guest to come on the D.A.R.E podcast, you can email us at thedarepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for supporting and look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much. In every month and then hit the repeat button to become the best version of yourself.